Hi everyone.
Hi.
Basically, this is the last Friday prayer that we have before we enter 2025.
Woo!
So this is a very special, very hopefully it really blesses everyone here. The teaching, so the teaching that I'm doing is a pre-class before we enter 2025. So when you enter 2025, it will be a prosperous year. Okay, so I think before I start the teaching, I have something to give. Something great. Not a gift. It's
Assignment.
Assignment. Here. So this is just a blessing for 2025. And the way I have made this blessing is I've taken every chapter that has like chapter 20 verse 25, and with that there's a whole blessing. So my teaching also is kind of in that line. So if you read all of the verses, it points to a very similar theme. So the theme which I am keeping for 2025 is the year of holy alignment and overflow. Okay, so we are going to study about 2 Samuel chapter 6. Now this talks about the bringing of the Ark of the Covenant back to Israel. So I'll tell you a little bit of what happened before. So this is when David was king. The Israelites went to war against the Philistines. Okay, and when they went to war, what they did is they went and they took the Ark of the Covenant. So everyone knows what the Ark of the Covenant is?
Yes.
So the Ark of the Covenant is this like a box kind of a thing that Moses made. Okay, you know who Moses is, right? So you know what was one thing God gave Moses? Something he had given him in the mountain. Do you remember? Yes, exactly. God gave Moses the 10 Commandments, and the Israelites, they put these 10 Commandments in this Ark of the Covenant. And this is basically, this Ark of the Covenant is a sign of God's presence and God's power. So what the Israelites did, they went and they took this Ark of the Covenant into the battle, thinking that, if we have the Ark of the Covenant, we will not be defeated. But that didn't happen. They were defeated. And what the Philistines did, they took the Ark of the Covenant home. Like they killed everyone in the battle and they took it to their home. And they put it in front of this, in temple of their god. What is their god's name? Dagon. Yes, in the temple of Dagon. And now they put it as a trophy, we won the battle against the Israelites. They put it in the temple of Dagon. Now the next morning, you know what happened? The next morning, so in the temple of Dagon there's a statue of their god, and the next morning this statue of Dagon was it fell down on its face right in front of the Ark of the Covenant. So when they reach the temple and they're seeing it down, it looks as if this statue is bowing down to the Ark of the Covenant. And then they thought maybe some accident happened, so they put it back up. The next night, when they went to the temple, what happened is the statue fell down, and this time the head and the hands were broken. But the Ark of the Covenant was absolutely fine, untouched. So they were like, okay, something is not right here. And apparently, since that day, they didn't step into the temple because they were afraid something bad would happen to them. In this city where this temple is, what happened is the people started getting boils on their skin. And after some time, there was a rat infestation. So rats were there everywhere and they were getting boils. And then they realized that it has something to do with the Ark of the Covenant. So they moved it from one city to another city, thinking that, okay, at least we will be happy here. And when the Ark of the Covenant went to the other city, there also the people experienced the same things, tumors and boils in their body. And they moved it to another city in the Philistine. that same thing happened. Finally, they were like, please, we have to do something about it. And what they did is they took this Ark of the Covenant and they put it on a cart. It was taken by 2 cows back to Israel. Now in this chapter, what is happening is David is, and like 30,000 men are going to collect it back. So they go to collect it back, and it's on this cart again, right? And when it is on this cart, what happens is they are like all very happy, dancing, rejoicing, taking it back home. But this Ark of the Covenant, since it's on this cart, it like the thing shakes and it's about to fall down. One of the men, whose name is Uzzah, he goes and he tries to stop it. When he tries to stop it, he is killed immediately. And then David is very scared. He's angry, he's so confused as to why that happened, and he left it there. Now, why did God kill Uzzah? Because of this. It sounds like a very noble thing to do. He was trying to save it from falling down. But they didn't follow God's instructions. In Numbers 4 verse 15, God clearly states how he wants the Ark of the Covenant to be transported. He says you have to put it through poles, and only the Levites have to carry it on their shoulders all the way to the city. But because they left it in that cart, which was the way the Philistines took it, and they didn't like change it and they didn't obey the instructions that God gave, Uzzah was punished. And because of what happened, they left it in a house, like the house closest there, and they left. And what happened is the house where they left it in experienced so much blessing and so much prosperity. David was a little jealous of it. So he immediately tried to go back there. 3 months later, he goes back there with the Levites, with the poles, and he brings it back to Israel. To the temple. Yeah, he brings it there, and the moment the Ark of the Covenant enters Israel, there is prosperity and there is blessing that overflows in Israel. Okay, so this is the story that we are going to talk about. In the same way that David and the Israelites had to realign themselves with God's purpose. As we start 2025, it is a chance for us to realign our hearts, our minds, and our actions with God's will for us. We are entering a year where, God wants to pour out His blessings. He wants to pour out His grace and His love unto us. But unless and until we are aligned with Him, we will miss out on it. So, what does it mean to be aligned with God? And what does it mean to be aligned with God? Now, being aligned with God means living intentionally to His will. Okay, Jami uncle, what happens when a car is not aligned?
It's not aligned.
Yeah, like when the alignment of the car is not proper, what happens?
It slows up.
It slows down?
No, it swerves off the road.
It swerves off the road. It goes out of its path.
Track
Yeah, and also the wheels get affected, the tires get affected, there's wear and tear. So in the same way, when we are not aligned, we end up struggling. We are off God's course, and we also we miss the peace and the blessings that He has in store for us. So God's aligning with God's will is more than just following the rules. It is about having a relationship with Him, knowing who He is, and knowing what His desires for us, His plans are for us. In Matthew 6 verse 33, does anyone know what that says? Matthew 6:33. It says, "Seek ye first the kingdom of heaven and its righteousness, and all these things will be added unto you." So when we seek God's kingdom first and His righteousness, everything that we need aligns with it. So when we see God, when we know Him, when we desire to know who He is, that time all of our struggles, whether there's no like, God doesn't have a like, I can only fix financial struggles, or I can only fix physical struggles. He can fix everything. Our theme for Christmas is, with God all things are possible. So when we focus on Him, when we realign ourselves with Him, we overflow. So now what is overflow? Overflow is what happens when we experience God's abundance in every area of our life. And it's not like just about having enough, it's about having more than enough. Malachi 3 verse 10, it's a really nice verse. 1 second. Bring thy tithes into the storehouse, that there may be food in my house, and thereby put me to the test, God says, if I will not open the windows of heaven for you and pour out an overflowing blessing. God, this is the first and the only time God is asking you to test Him. He says, you test me if I will not do this for you. So when we align ourselves and experience overflow is God giving us more than what we need. He is not, he doesn't have insufficient. He has more than enough to give for everyone. So, and God's overflow is also not limited to material items. We can experience overflow in our spiritual life, in our relationships, in our careers, in our job places, in our studies. Everywhere we can experience overflow. God's overflow is not limited to only material items. Yeah? Okay. Now we're going to talk about 4 points. I'm not sure how to title it, if it's 4 points or steps, but just 4 points. At the end you decide what it is about. But so point number 1 is, holy alignment is God's design. So from the beginning of time, since Adam and Eve, God walked with fellowship with them. He shared His plans, He shared His desires, everything. He was with them at all times. It was His plan from the very beginning. But what happened when sin, and so this was Adam and Eve and this was God, and they walked in alignment. And while they were in alignment, everything was fine. The Garden of Eden was prosperous, the animals were prosperous, everything was fine. But the moment sin came in between, what happened? Everything just went out of balance. Adam and Eve struggled, and there was no connection. Even like now we see the land is suffering, animals are suffering, we are suffering, because why? Sin came in between us, and we were removed from that alignment that we had with God. But then Jesus came, and He acted as that bridge between both of us. Isaiah 58 verse 12 says that He is the bridge that brings us back into connection. But unless and until we take that step and position ourselves, we cannot experience overflow. Like, God has given us the way. John 14 verse 6 says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And whoever believes in me shall not perish. So the way is there, but you have to choose to go in that way, to align yourself and to be in that position for you to experience that overflow and to walk in alignment with God. He is a holy God. This one thing that really I noticed even in this story is, God is holy. The reason why Uzzah was killed was because they didn't respect the reverence of God. He is just because the Philistines treated him and treated the ark in whatever way they did, doesn't mean that they can also, the Israelites, knowing the law, knowing what they are supposed to do, they did not change themselves, they did not obey or respect the holiness of God. So in the same way, God is a holy God, and unless and until we have reverence for Him, we will not be able to align with Him. We will not be able to connect with Him and experience that overflow in our life. And also, when we talk about God's plan and God's commandments for us, so basically God's plan is very pure and very simple. In Exodus 20 verse 25, can someone read it please?
Okay. And if you make me an altar of stone, you shall not build it of hewn stone. For if you use your tool on it, you have profaned it.
Yeah. So basically, in this, God is saying, if you want to build me an altar, He gives a very simple instruction. He's not overcomplicating. It is very pure, very simple. Many times we try to overcomplicate God's plan, and we think, okay, He can do this much, and then I will do this much, and then she can do this much, and together it will all work out. But at the end, what happens? One big mess it becomes, and then we again find ourselves going back to God in that helpless state that we were before. So God's plan is very simple. That if we follow that simple plan and just rely on Him, focus on Him, it would just be much easier for us to follow His will and follow His way. It will save us a lot of trouble in the end. So when we follow, we have to follow His design, nothing more, nothing less, exactly what He wants us to do. Now, point number 2 is misalignment leads to defeat. Even when we have all the resources, all the talents, and all the wisdom, when we don't align ourselves with God, we are set up for failure. Judges 20 verse 25 and Numbers 20 verse 25 are examples. Numbers 20 verse 25 are both examples of this. Now, in Judges 20 verse 25, I'll just give you a gist of what happens. The Israelites are going to war against the Benjamites.
Yeah.
The Benjamites. So they are going to war against them, and so it's all the 11 tribes against this one Benjamite tribe. So they are very confident. They're like, we have more people, we have more weapons. They go to war in that confidence, but they are defeated. And what happens is they go back and they cry at the feet of God. And only when they cry and they humble themselves in front of God, they receive the victory. Same thing in Numbers 20 verse 25. What is happening is in 20, basically what's happening is the Israelites are in the desert. They're walking around, and they want water. So God tells Moses, you speak to the rock, and it will open and water will come. But Moses got irritated with the Israelites complaining, and also he got a little, I think, prideful, because he said, why do we have to keep giving you all these things? And he got irritated, and instead of listening to what God said to speak to the rock. Instead, what he does, he goes and he hits the rock twice. Water comes, but God is very disappointed. And you know what he says? He says, because you do not trust me enough to demonstrate my holiness to the people of God, you will not enter the promised land. So Numbers 20 verse 25 basically is talking about the burial of Aaron. So in both of these, what we see is when this is like Old Testament God, which was like another level, very strict, very angry, not the God that we see right now, we experience right now. But when they misaligned, they were defeated or they were killed. But there was this really nice verse, 2 Corinthians 1 verse 9.
Yes, we had the sentence of death in ourselves, that we should not trust in ourselves, but in God who raises the dead.
Yeah. So this verse tells us that God's intention is not to hurt us, but rather His intention was to, change our perspective and remind us that He is the one that we have to rely on. And when we rely on Him, He can raise us from the dead. So even all these scenarios, when we are not aligned and when we are defeated, it is not God trying to hurt us or punish us, but it is only a redirection to God's actual plan for you. There's this one quote I've heard: God's rejection is His redirection for you. When you pray for something and you don't get it, it is not because He doesn't want you to have it, or he doesn't want you to prosper, it is because he's either preparing you for something greater, or he has a different plan in store for you. So the second point is misalignment leads to defeat, but we don't have to fear it, because that only shows us that there is a better plan for us, or there is something that we were missing that didn't allow us to get the blessing. Okay. Third point is overflow comes from obedience and faith. So what is obedience? Obedience is submitting to God's authority and following His commandments. It is not just doing what is right, but doing what God requires us to do. Even if it doesn't make sense, even if we don't think it is right, it is just listening and obeying, trusting and obeying. In 2 Kings 4 verse 1 to 7, it is talking about, there was this widow, and this widow, she, like, basically her husband had died and she has 2 sons, and there are these people who come, like, basically they had some debt, and some people came like asking back for the money, and they were going to take her sons because she was not able to pay them back. So what Elisha, what he does is, he tells her, you go to your neighbors, ask them for all the pots, empty pots that they have, take it to your house, close the door, and whatever oil you have, start pouring it into the jars. So that's exactly what the woman did. Her sons went and collected all the jars, they closed the door, and she had very little oil, but she poured it. And she poured and she poured and she poured, and all the jars were filled. And Elijah says, you can sell this, pay back pay back your debts, and you can use it to sustain yourself. So when we obey, we overflow. And overflow is equal to obedience plus faith. Now faith is believing in things that are not seen, in things that don't make sense. Faith is trusting God even when it doesn't make sense. In this story in 2 Samuel chapter 6, after David realized their mistakes, he corrected it, and when he followed God's instructions, they were not only successful in bringing it back, but Israel was rejoicing. Israel prospered the moment they brought the Ark of the Covenant back. Now the last point is, alignment positions us to overflow. Okay, so John 20 verse 25 talks about Thomas, when after Jesus is risen from the dead, all the disciples see Jesus except for Thomas, and they tell him, like, we saw Jesus, we saw him alive, we saw him, and what he says is, until and unless I see him and I put my fingers through the holes in his hands, I will not believe. So when we are not aligned with God, the first sign is we first start with an internal battle. In this case, like for Thomas, it was his doubt, because he got separated from God. He moved his focus from God. He didn't believe that God was there, and because he didn't believe, he didn't miss out yet, because God was just so loving and so generous that he showed up again to see Thomas and to allow him to put his fingers through his hands. But when Thomas believed, he was able to experience the joy and the peace that Christ died for. If he didn't believe, he would have never been part of the whole journey. He would have never believed. He would have not been part of the Pentecost. He wouldn't have had the faith to go and spread the word to nations. And if he had never gone to spread the word to the nations, our lovely state of Kerala would have never known who Jesus was, because he is the one who brought Christianity to the Malabar coast. And because of that, all of us are here today. All of us are here believing in Jesus today. So if Thomas had missed out, we also would have missed out. That's a very crazy way of thinking of it. But when we align ourselves with God, not only are we blessed, but everyone around us experiences the blessing. When David brought the Ark of the Covenant to Israel, his home was blessed, but every home in Israel received blessing, and every home in Israel experienced and felt the presence of God. The commentary was saying the day they lost the Ark of the Covenant was the darkest day, and the day they got it back was the brightest, that is excluding the time when Jesus came back. So it brought light and it brought hope to every home. So when we align ourselves, not only are we blessed, but we bring that blessing to those around us automatically. There's nothing we have to do. It flows through us. So for this year, for 2025, God is calling us to align with Him so that His will for us to experience His blessings and to experience His joy will come to pass. And not only for us, but for our family and for our friends. Everyone will experience Him. So we need to, for 2025, we need to remember to realign, to rejoice, to realign basically, to even whenever we fail, which we will fail, it is okay. But when we fail, to realize that we have failed and to run back to God's presence, ask for forgiveness and to fall back into His plan, to rejoice. When David and all the Israelites came with the Ark of the Covenant, they were dancing in the streets and they were rejoicing. So when we experience our blessings, it is our responsibility to rejoice and to share. Testimonies are the most encouraging thing we can hear. And now obviously, in our thank you, we will hear all the testimonies, but we have to rejoice. And last, to release the blessings that we are having to everyone around us, to share it with. Maybe you can start with praying for someone without telling them, just praying for someone, and slowly release the blessing and the joy and the overflowing that you have into others around you. Yeah, that's it.